Hi all, a bit of a return to our regular programming. Um, we are, that was supposed to be a normal statement, but it turned out to be a joke. And speaking of normal statements, we are going to get into the use of more Boolean logic statements. And we're going to do this with looping. And so let's make a new class and we'll call it looping practice. And if I see looping practice, well, I've already done a loop practice, but looping practice is going to talk about looping. And what is looping? Well, looping is repeating the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Maybe that's the definition of insanity, but in general, this is sort of what we're looking at. We do the same statements over and over, but we change things over time. And so when might we want to use this? Well, let's say we have a big list of numbers and we want to add them up. We don't want to have a bunch of different statements that are, that necessarily we have to write out. Maybe someone's entering a bunch of numbers, and we want to be able to add those as they come in, and we don't know how many there are. Maybe we want to, do something where we print out a bunch of characters in sort of a pyramid formation, and get something, and maybe don't know exactly how many rows, or maybe we have too many rows to be able to program, with a million different system print statements. Okay, so let's try this out. Okay, first, a loop is going to, again, have some condition. So remember, the loop is going to execute, remember, conditions can be true or false, and the loop will execute if the condition is true. It will not execute or stop if the condition is false. So it's like an if statement on some gamma rays, making the Hulk. Okay, so here's what happens. I'm going to say, I'm going to make a counter. And I'm going to start at 0. And this counter is really important for the first type of loop we'll be talking about, called while, the while loop. So the while loop is a good idea to, if we're counting how many times we're going to do this, to have a counter variable. Sometimes you don't need this. Sometimes you're just looking at when things are updated and it won't be obvious how many times you want to loop. But if you want to count how many times you want to execute a statement, having a counter variable or a variable to keep track of that is very helpful. So to start out, the syntax looks like this. While some condition is true. Okay, so could I just say true here? Or could I just say false? Yeah, sure. It would work. Would it ever stop? No, it would not. This would continue on forever. So for example, what is the name of this book? How many times will this print out? It will never stop. We have as many of these as we want. There's nothing that makes our condition false. And it's important to sort of understand the control flow here. So I'm going to stop this for a second. I'm going to go through and I'm going to look at the while statement. And line 14 is going to be investigated when we're running this program. Our condition is going to be evaluated. And if it's true, we're going to do the stuff inside. At the end of the loop, once we've done the stuff inside, we're going to jump back up to line 14. We're going to evaluate the condition. If it's true, we're going to execute. Once we're done executing, down here at line 17, we jump back up to line 14, and so on and so forth until the condition is false. Condition here is never false. If I do while false, well, this is never going to run. I get an unreachable code error. This is basically useless. Now let's start to think about what I can do to make this slightly more useful. Infinite loops are a little weird, and it's true, I could do something like this, where I break, which cuts me out of the loop, but that's just sort of a little trick for now that we're not going to really go into. So break cuts me out of the loop, but if I cut out after one time, it's sort of like I wrote a bunch of code for nothing. So now I'm going to look at conditionals, or some conditions in here where I have my counter somehow related in an inequality or some equality with some other number. So let's say I want to print this out 10 times. Well, my counter is less than 10. I want to print this. But the thing is, my counter, if I just run this as is, it's always going to be less than 10. I'm never going to be changing it. So I get another infinite loop. So I'll stop this. Infinite meaning never ending. And what do I have to do? I have to change my counter somehow. Maybe I could say counter equals 10. Well, that would certainly be breaking this condition. And I'll run it, and it only prints once, so that's not very useful. What do I have to do? I have to change my counter every time. And the way I'm going to end up doing that is I'm going to say counter equals counter plus 1, or in more common parlance, counter plus plus. These two statements do the exact same thing. So I'm going to switch them. Just as a reminder that that's what that means. I'm increasing the counter by 1. So what happens here? Well, first, I check to see if counter is less than 10. Counter is 0, so it's less than 10. I print out what is the name of this book. I increase the value of counter by 1, so now the value of counter is 1. Is 1 less than 10? Yes, it is, so I'll execute my statement. Again, I'll increase counter, and I'll jump back to the top again. Now counter is 2. 2 is less than 10. I'll print this out. I'll increase my counter, and I'll jump back to the top. And I'll keep doing this until counter is 10, basically, which means I go through 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 10 iterations, 10 times through the loop. And then on the 11th time, when counter is equal to 10, I stop, because this condition is then false. As soon as this is false, I'm not going to execute this stuff. I'm going to skip ahead to line 19. So maybe I'll print out here, loop ended. Okay, so let's run this, and I'll see how many times I print this out. What is the name of this book? Well, that's sort of hard to see, so maybe I want to print out the counter beforehand. And maybe I'll change this to be a little bit easier to read. Counter is equal to 1. Well, counter is less than or equal to 10. This will still go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 times through the loop. But this time maybe I'll be numbered correctly. So here, I'll say counter plus, maybe I'll do that. And so here's what I get. 1, what is the name of this book? 2, what is the name of this book? 3, what is the name of this book? It turns out what is the name of this book is the name of a book full of logic puzzles, which I highly recommend. But in this case, I've printed out 10 times, and then I say loop ended, because I've cut out of the loop, and I've executed the statement at the bottom. So first time through, I'm at 1. 1 is less than or equal to 10. I print out, I increase to 2. 2 is less than or equal to 10. I print out 2 plus, what is the name of this book? Increase to 3, etc., etc., etc. Until I reach 10. Again, I execute. Again, I print out. And then I increase to 11, and then I pop out of my loop because it's false. The condition is then false. Okay, great. So I have this idea of a while loop. Can I put a loop inside of a loop? Absolutely. Can I put an if statement inside of a loop? Absolutely. I can combine conditionals and these while loops as much as I want. For instance, I can skip printing out, let's say counter is not equal to 5. What I can say is I'll print out if counter is not equal to 5. So what's going to happen here? Well, I have a conditional. Which number did I skip? I go from 4 to 6. I still increment the counter, but I don't print the line when the counter is 5. I could say, or the counter is greater than 9. Let's say greater than or equal to 9. So I'll run this, and you'll notice, oops, okay. Let's see, this is short-circuiting here. So let's say and the counter is less than or equal to 9. That's what I mean. Okay, that makes much more sense. And less than 9. Here we go. So 1 through 4 is printed, 5 is not printed, 6 through 8 is printed, but 9 and 10 aren't, because I include this statement here on the end. I can combine these and work with the counter and print things sometimes and not others.